I was halfway through my roasted asparagus when my daughter-in-law Chloe leaned across the white tablecloth with a smirk. "Eat as much as you want, Florence." She practically chimed her voice, carrying over the soft jazz of the restaurant. "You're the one paying for this, after all." She picked up her glass of imported Pinot Noir, taking a slow sip while holding my gaze. I sat at the head of a table I had booked 2 months in advance. It was a high-end seafood and steak place downtown, and I had invited my son Mark and Chloe to celebrate my late husband's birthday. I wanted a nice evening, a moment to share some good memories. Instead, I was treated like a walking wallet who had crashed their private date. I looked over at Mark. He was staring intensely at his garlic mashed potatoes. He didn't correct her. He didn't defend me. He just let the disrespect hang in the air exactly like he had for the past 3 years. Something quiet and cold settled in my chest. I didn't feel like crying. I just felt completely, utterly done. I set my cloth napkin on the table, smoothing out the creases. I picked up my purse and stood. "Where are you going?" Mark mumbled, finally looking up. "I'm heading home," I replied evenly. "Enjoy your dinner." Chloe rolled her eyes, clearly thinking I was just throwing a minor tantrum. I walked away without another word. On my way out, I stopped at the host stand. I knew the manager slightly. I quietly explained that I was leaving early, paid in cash for my specific appetizer and drink, and firmly instructed them to remove my credit card from the table's open tab. I stepped out into the cool evening air, the valet pulling my sedan around. The main courses hadn't even arrived yet. The drive back to the suburbs was peaceful. I rolled the window down a crack, letting the crisp night wind clear my head. For years, I had told myself that keeping the peace was the most important thing. I was a 68-year-old widow, and Mark was my only child. When he and Chloe struggled with rent 3 years ago, I let them move into the attached guest house on my property. Just until we saved for a down payment Mark had promised. But there was no savings account. There were designer handbags for Chloe weekend trips to the vineyards and a brand new leased SUV. Meanwhile, I paid the property taxes, the water bill, the internet, and the heating. I bought the bulk of the groceries. I was subsidizing their luxury lifestyle, and my reward was being mocked in public. I pulled into my driveway. The house was a sturdy, single-story ranch with a separate entrance for the guest suite. It was the house my husband and I had built a place of warmth and respect. It had slowly turned into a hotel where I was the unpaid staff. I unlocked the front door, turned on the kitchen lights, and put the kettle on the stove. The silence of the empty house didn't feel lonely tonight. It felt like armor. I poured a cup of chamomile tea and sat at the kitchen island staring at the digital clock on the microwave. They were likely finishing their steaks right about now. The waiter would be walking over with the leather booklet containing the bill. I took a slow sip of my tea. At exactly 8:45 p.m., my phone screen lit up on the counter. I watched the phone vibrate across the granite countertop. It was Mark. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text message popped up from Chloe. "What did you do?" "The waiter says your card isn't on file. We owe $450. I set my mug down. I didn't type out a long, emotional paragraph. I didn't explain how she hurt my feelings. I simply typed back, "You reminded me I was paying." I decided I didn't want to anymore. "You can cover your own meals." The phone rang again immediately. This time I answered. "Mom? What is going on?" Mark's voice was high-pitched, panicked. "We don't have enough in checking to cover this. They're standing right here. Then I suggest you put it on a credit card, Mark." I answered calmly. "This is embarrassing," Chloe yelled in the background. "Tell her to give them the card number over the phone." "You told me to eat up because I was paying." I reminded them, my tone completely flat. "If I'm just the bank is closed. Figure it out." I hung up the phone and switched it to airplane mode. I wasn't going to spend my evening listening to them panic over a situation they created. I finished my tea, washed the mug, and went to my bedroom to read. About an hour and a half later, the sharp glare of headlights swept across my bedroom wall. A car door slammed hard, then another. Heavy, furious footsteps marched up the driveway, heading straight for the door that connected their suite to my main living area. The handle to the adjoining door rattled violently. I had thrown the heavy deadbolt as soon as I got home. They had a key to the outer door of their suite, but the door leading into my house was firmly locked. "Florence, open!" "This door!" Chloe shouted through the wood. I turned the page of my book and ignored her. Eventually, the pounding stopped, replaced by the muffled sounds of them arguing in their own space. The next morning, I woke up at my usual time, brewed coffee, and watered the ferns on the porch. At 9 o'clock, there was a soft, hesitant knock at my front door. It was Mark. He looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped. I opened the door and let him step into the foyer, but I didn't offer him a seat. Mom last night was a disaster. He started running a hand through his hair. We had to call Chloe's sister to Venmo us the money. "Why would you do that? Why would your wife insult me in front of strangers, and why would you let her?" I countered. He sighed, the classic deflection coming right on cue. "She was just joking. You know she has a sharp sense of humor. We rely on you, Mom. You rely on me, but you don't respect me," I corrected him. That dynamic ends today. I walked over to the entryway table, picked up a manila folder I had prepared weeks ago but never had the courage to use, and handed it to him. He frowned, opening it. "What is this?" "That's the itemized cost of keeping you two in the guest house," I said. "Starting the 1st of next month, things are changing." Mark stared at the spreadsheet. It detailed the electricity, the water, the high-speed internet they needed for their gaming and streaming, and the landscaping costs. Starting on the 1st, I explained, keeping my voice steady. "You will pay exactly 50% of these utilities. You will also buy your own groceries and household supplies. I am removing my name from your auto insurance policy today." Mark's face drained of color. "Mom, we can't afford this. You know, Chloe's salary mostly goes to her student loans and her car payment. Then she needs a cheaper car," I suggested plainly. The front door swung open and Chloe marched in. She had used her emergency key. She saw the folder in Mark's hand, snatched it, and scanned the numbers. Her face turned bright red. "Are you serious?" she snapped, glaring at me. "You're charging us to live in your house." "We're family, Florence. Family doesn't use each other," I replied, stepping forward so I was standing directly in front of her. "You've lived here rent-free for 3 years. You've treated my generosity as a weakness. Now you'll pay your own way." "This is ridiculous." Chloe threw the paper on the floor. "You have plenty of money. You don't even need this." "It's not about need. It's about boundaries," I said, picking up the paper and handing it back to Mark. "If the money isn't transferred to my account by the 1st of every month, I will serve you with a formal eviction notice. Have a good day at work." Chloe stormed out, pulling Mark behind her. She didn't realize that the utilities were just the first step in taking my life back. By Thursday, the atmosphere in the house was frosty. Chloe made a point of slamming the adjoining door whenever she left, and Mark avoided eye contact when I saw him in the driveway. I didn't let it bother me. I had a project to finish. For the last 2 years, I hadn't been able to park my car in my own 2-car garage. It was packed to the ceiling with Chloe and Mark's belongings, an expensive stationary bike that gathered dust, seasonal decorations they bought and used once, and boxes of clothes Chloe refused to donate. I called a local moving and junk removal crew. When the 2 men arrived in their truck, I pointed to the garage. "Everything in there needs to be moved to the guest suite side of the driveway. Stack it neatly and put this heavy waterproof tarp over it." It took them 2 hours. By noon, my garage was completely empty, the floor swept clean. I pulled my sedan inside, put the car in park, and smiled. At 5:30 p.m., Chloe pulled in. I watched through the kitchen window as she stepped out of her car, staring in absolute shock at the massive mountain of boxes and exercise equipment sitting on her side of the driveway. She marched up to my door and banged on the glass. I opened it a few inches. "What did you do to my stuff?" she screamed. "I cleared out my garage," I answered calmly. "Winter is coming and I want to park my car indoors. You have a lot of belongings. I suggest you move them inside your suite before it rains." She looked like she was going to explode. She glared at me, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You're going to regret this." I didn't take Chloe's threat lightly, but I didn't panic either. I just started paying closer attention. The next afternoon, I ran to the local farmer's market. I was only gone for 45 minutes. When I walked back into my house, setting my canvas bags on the counter, I heard a distinct clinking sound coming from the formal dining room. I walked quietly down the hall. There was Chloe holding an empty cardboard box. She was carefully taking my grandmother's vintage crystal glasses and a silver tea set out of the display cabinet and wrapping them in newspaper. "What exactly are you doing?" I asked, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. Chloe jumped, dropping a piece of newspaper. She tried to recover her arrogant posture, but her hands were shaking. "Since you forced all these new bills on us, we have to sell some things. You never use this stuff anyway. It's just gathering dust." She was stealing from me to fund her lifestyle. I didn't yell. I walked over, took the box out of her hands, and set it firmly on the dining table. "Give me the emergency key," I demanded. "Mark said I don't care what Mark said. Give me the key to my house right now." She reached into her pocket and threw the spare key on the carpet. She marched out, slamming the adjoining door behind her. I picked up the key, but I knew better than to trust it was the only copy. I pulled out my phone and searched for a local business. By 4 p.m., a professional locksmith was standing in my hallway, drilling the old brass fixtures out of my doors. With the locks changed and the utilities separated, the reality of adult life finally hit Mark and Chloe. I watched from a distance as their carefully constructed lifestyle began to crack. Without my credit card covering their groceries, the delivery drivers stopped showing up. Without my check covering the heating bill, they had to turn the thermostat down in the guest suite. 2 weeks later, a dealership employee came and drove Chloe's leased SUV away. They had downgraded to a single sensible used car. I heard them arguing through the walls. Chloe's voice was constantly raised, complaining about the budget, complaining about the lack of space, complaining about me. Mark's voice was usually tired and defensive. The glue that had held their marriage together, my money was gone, and they were left looking at each other. I focused entirely on myself. I joined a morning walking group with some women from my neighborhood. I spent the weekends tending to my garden, planting tulips for the spring. My grocery bill was slashed in half, and the house stayed perfectly clean. One Saturday afternoon, I was sweeping the front porch when Mark walked up the driveway. He looked older, the stress carving deep lines around his eyes. He didn't have his usual defensive posture. He stood at the bottom of the porch steps, hands in his pockets. "Your new locks work well," he noted quietly. "They do exactly what they're supposed to," I agreed, leaning on my broom. He stared down at the concrete. "She wants to leave Mom, Chloe. She says she can't live like this anymore." I looked at my son. I felt a pang of sympathy, but I didn't let it override my common sense. "Living like what, Mark?" I asked gently. "Paying your own bills. Living within your actual income." He rubbed his face. "We can't afford the rent anywhere else in town right now. We're tapped out from paying off the debts we racked up. She found an apartment a few towns over, but we need first, last, and a security deposit." He looked up, his eyes silently pleading. It was the same look he had used since he was 10 years old to get an advance on his allowance. Could you just float us the deposit just this once so we can get out of your hair? I leaned the broom against the railing. I loved my son, but saving him right now would only teach him that Chloe's disrespect and his own passivity carried no real consequences. No, Mark, I said clearly. He blinked, stunned. Mom, please. You two are adults. You have jobs. You can sell that expensive stationary bike you left in the driveway, or Chloe can sell some of her handbags. But I am not writing a check to fund your move. He opened his mouth to argue, saw the finality in my expression, and slowly closed it. He nodded once, a gesture of defeat, and walked back to the guest suite. The following Friday, a budget moving truck backed into the driveway. Chloe carried boxes out without ever looking in my direction. By sunset, the suite was empty. As the taillights of their truck faded down the street, I locked the adjoining door for the last time. 6 months later, my life looked entirely different. The guest suite was no longer a source of stress. I had repainted it and rented it out to a traveling physical therapist. She was a quiet, respectful woman in her 30s who paid her rent on the first of the month and brought my newspaper up to the porch if it rained. My savings account was growing again. I slept through the night without hearing slamming doors or shouting matches. I felt lighter, years younger. Mark still came around, though Chloe never accompanied him. One Sunday morning, he sat at my kitchen island drinking coffee. He looked tired. He was working overtime to cover their new apartment, but there was a new maturity in his posture. He wasn't waiting for a handout anymore. Chloe's still mad at you, he said, stirring his coffee. She thinks you ruined everything. Chloe is entitled to her feelings, I replied, taking a sip of my own coffee. But I don't have to finance them. He gave a small, genuine smile. I guess not. I'm sorry I let her talk to you like that at the restaurant, Mom. I was a coward. You were, I agreed, simply. But you're learning. I didn't need to fix his marriage or his bank account. I had drawn my line in the sand, and I was finally standing safely on my own side of it. When I look back on that night at the steakhouse, I don't feel anger. I just feel relief. Chloe told me to eat as much as I wanted because I was paying for it. She was right. I am paying my own way, living in my own space entirely on my own terms. And that kind of peace, that is truly priceless. Looking back, the biggest lesson I learned wasn't about money or real estate. It was about value. For the longest time, I thought that by being the giver, I was being a good mother and a good person. But I was actually teaching the people around me that my time, my home, and my dignity were things they could take for granted without consequences. Boundaries aren't about being mean or spiteful. They are about protecting your own peace. When you finally stop setting yourself on fire to keep others warm, you'll be surprised at how much clearer your life becomes. You don't need anyone's permission to stop being a doormat. You deserve to be treated with the same respect you give to others, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for those you love is to say no and mean it. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life lessons on setting boundaries and finding your own voice, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support helps me keep sharing these stories of growth and independence. Let's keep building a space where we can learn, reflect, and grow stronger together. I'll see you in the next one.